The triple bar chart, as you might expect, very familiar and similar to the double bar chart, except instead of 2 series of related data, we've got 3. So in this example here, I'm showing you a chart for HR, since we can all relate to that, and it's employee attrition by reason over time. So in the double bar chart, we showed employee numbers, employee counts by gender, because it worked, right? So in this one, we maybe have 3 things we want to look at. So I'm taking this example of reason for attrition, and maybe we have 3 reasons. So by way of introduction on how to use it, let's just say we've got reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. And since this is a vertical bar, we can use over time. So let's just look at this from a perspective of over time. So say that's 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, and 2019. And we can see then how these change over time. Now, there's a few things you're going to notice here. We can see the big reason number 1 is going down over time. They're sort of all going down over time. But we notice there's some anomalies going on with reason number 2, right? We can see from here, there's a height difference between the 2. Reason number 1's higher. But we notice that reason number 2's gotten higher than reason number 1, and then it's really dropped down here, right? So we can see some unusual patterns going on here. And we also see that there's a fairly consistent downward trend for reason number 3. And maybe we're happy about that, so that one's green. So we're highlighting that as green. But you can see some of the good things about this and maybe some of the bad things already. So when we're looking at this from a way to compare things, in this case related things, they have to be related to make sense. And it's easier to spot the extreme differences, right? So we can spot the extremes, but it can be harder to spot trends, right? So it can be a little bit challenging to spot trends in when we start to add a third column to each one of these groupings. We also want to look at ordinal data again, because it's a vertical bar, right? So we can see we're using time here, so we're using years. So we couldn't do that with the horizontal bar equivalent of that. It just really wouldn't make that much sense to do it that way. And again, so we want to use the groupings, we want to keep them tight, right? So we don't want really any spacing between these, but we also want to have adequate spacing between the groupings so that they're easier to differentiate. So that means we don't want to have a whole ton of bars stacked in together, so it's very, very tight. Or scrolling, we have to avoid scrolling as well. Some of the other things we're going to be thinking about here is the how we grab people's attention with color. And in this example, I wanted to show you green. So let's say we wanted to draw someone's attention to something that's positive for us, or it's the one we're very interested in, and it's going the direction that we want. So we're using the color green here to highlight that, right? And we're trying to keep the colors somewhat muted. Now, alternatively, if there was nothing interesting here, you could make these shades of gray. Each one of these could be a different shade of gray, being colorblind appropriate as well, of course, so we have to have adequate differentiation in the colors and the hues. Like any type of dashboard and chart, we have to know what we're answering, what question we're answering, what action we're driving towards, right? So that's how we came up with this chart title. So if we just look at this, employee attrition by reason. So the reason are these. Over time is our axes. Okay, so the axes down here would just be time, and the y-axis over here is count of attrition, or let's just say attrition. I'll just use shorthand number, right? So that's the number of employees that have attrited or that have left, right? So we can quickly see that these are all on the same scale. They're all related data series, so it makes sense to put it together. On the flip side, just like in all our other charts, we have to make sure we're answering a question, a very clear question. Now, this question can actually become the chart title, right? So just keep that in mind. And that's usually how I like to design my dashboards is, whatever the question is here that we have on the back of this card, that it would make it over to the chart title once the dashboard's actually developed. It just makes it very easy for new users to that dashboard to understand the question that's being answered. And the action that we're driving down here. Now in this example, it could be any number of actions, right? If we see, okay, there's a reason number 2 is trending up. So the action is to firstly understand what's reason number 2, what's driving it. So what's the root cause of reason number 2? So that'd be an action, understand the root cause potentially, and then address it, right? So maybe it's a series of meetings, maybe it's some things that have to be figured out, but there is some thought that's gone into the action. So we do all of this before we even pick the chart type. Because if you look at that, you might consider some other chart types that maybe are a bit more intuitive to spot those things that you're trying to identify associated with that action. Maybe you might want to look at a line chart, multiple line chart. There'd be other things you might want to look at. So that just gives you a quick overview of the triple bar, very similar to the double bar, of course, but for three data series. But also just notice some of the challenges that can start to emerge when we introduce more bars. And we really want to cap it at 3 in a grouping here. Often you'll see some 4 bars in a group, 5 bars in a group, but it exacerbates and magnifies some of the challenges with this type of visual, and you might be better off looking at other chart types.